Welcome back to the Intercourse Show. I'm your host, Mr. B. In tonight's discussion, we are going to talk about choke points. For those of you who have not been following along, what's trending right now is the Iran war. And we are now in the third week, heading into the fourth week of this war. And it seems like it's going to continue. Now, one of the major points of discussion has been the Strait of Hormuz, which is a choke point where 80% of our petroleum and other goods come through in order to get to us, the Western world. And it's controlled right now by Iran. Now, it is without a doubt that we are militarily superior to Iran, but without necessarily having all the equipment that we have and all the advantages that we have, they are able to influence the world and essentially hit us where it hurts, which is our pocketbook, simply by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which is a choke point. It's a region that they can control that is essential to global trade. And Patrick Bet-David just recently did a piece on the various choke points throughout the world that may be a point of crisis for us should we get into conflicts with others, and who controls those choke points and what precedence is this particular war setting for those particular choke points elsewhere. So let's jump into Patrick Bet-David's presentation on those choke points.
In Iran affecting Strait of Hormuz is impacting everybody. I think it's fair to say the war in Iran affecting Strait of Hormuz is impacting everybody around the world financially. But here's the one question that no one's talking about. So this is one choke point that we have in the world, Strait of Hormuz. And people are like, you probably on a day-to-day stuff, you weren't thinking about how much power Iran had to say, I'm not going to let anybody else in. You guys are locked in. We have mines. Everyone learned about Karg Island and how powerful it is and how much control Iran has. Well, wait a minute. I didn't know they were this strong. Well, if that's the case, what are the other choke points in the world that if all of a sudden China's like, you want to put this much pain on me that I'm being cornered with oil prices? Wait a minute. Let me tell you what I can do to you and the rest of the world with Taiwan and the 90% of semiconductors that's coming there. If they do that, there's one strait nobody is talking about. It's so important, and China privately doesn't want you to know about this one strait that will impact them in a massive way. $3.5 trillion a year moves through this place. We're going to talk about that place. And an idea that Israel came up with in the 60s amongst each other became public in 1994 that could be a direct competitor to Suez Canal. We're going to talk about all of that stuff today.
I was this close to signing the HELOC paperwork. I dug deeper, and here's what I learned before I signed. Let me break it down. HELOC on.
All right, so contrary to popular belief on X, I've been doing board videos since 2013. I've been doing these for a long time, and if you're watching and saying, Pat, I love the board videos you do, I have a favor to ask you. 51% of you watch our content. You've never subscribed to the channel, but you watch it every single week. If you're one of them and you like what we do, you want to help us out, we're at 7 million subs. I'd like to get to 10 million subs. Click on that subscribe button. It helps us out with our algorithms and grows our audience. Thank you for doing that. Just click on that subscribe button right there. Having said that, let's get right into another board video here. So, Strait of Hormuz, okay, Persian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, 21 million barrels a day goes through Strait of Hormuz. We're seeing the pain for everybody. Gas prices this morning, I'm talking to Rob, on the podcast. He says, Pat, gas prices 2 weeks ago, he's paying $2.75. This morning, $3.99. If you're watching this, your gas prices have probably gone up 50 cents to $1.20 per gallon. Whatever part of the country you live in, you're feeling it, right? Now, why is that? 20 to 25% of all seaborne oil trade, 20% of global LNG goes through the Strait of Hormuz, primarily oil from Saudi, UAE, or Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and a big chunk of the oil that China relies on comes from here. So they felt the pain in a massive way. So what does Iran do with Operation Epic Fury that started on February 28th? Iran closed the strait March 2nd. Now, they've done this to 21 different merchant ships. Obviously, we've destroyed their navy. We've killed 50 of their leaders. Supreme leader, we just killed their chief intelligence officer. So this is not a good situation. But if you go right now to find out if Strait of Hormuz is open or closed, it'll say restricted. Why? We'll get to that here in a minute as well. Keep in mind, a lot of people think Strait of Hormuz, it's 21 miles wide. If it's 21 miles wide, you have to be able to get a bunch of ships that go through at the same time, right? Nope. Only two. Only two? Only two. Why? It's not, if you think it's a deep place and you can have 50 ships going through, that's not the case. So economical implications, largest oil supply disruption ever. Brent crude went from 100 to 126. Omani crude 150. I think the record is 145. I don't know if we're going to hit it or not. Some massive thing needs to happen to hit the record. Oil prices could hit 200 if this continues. Some people say it's a little bit of fear porn, but it's also reality. If all of a sudden Karg Islands hit and Iran just says, forget about it, and a couple ships are truly hit in a massive way, you can see that every day this thing stays. If it stays closed for 3 weeks, we're dealing with a $200. It's never happened before. Could get to that point. U.S. gas prices up nearly $5 in California. Global oil crisis losing 8 million barrels a day. That's that part. Now, in the logistical problem side, limited mobility. We talked about the U.S. military resources, 7 to 8 destroyers for just 3 to 4 tankers. China, India, non-Western countries still allowed in the area. So Iran said, look, if you're China, you're India, your partner, go through. If you're friends with the Western side, you cannot come through this year. There's a price for it. And if you notice, NATO storm, here from UK, and I don't know if we're with them, President Trump comes out, I need you guys to be on our side. Oh, we can. We want to kind of have a place because we got to get through. So it's an interesting thing that's going on right now. Who's going to be siding with them? Who's not? And this leads to the secondary consequences, which is port congestion, longer shipping times, delays on sulfur and aluminum, crops, semiconductors, worldwide inflation, shipping, insurance costs. Anyways, there's a bunch of things that can happen here, but that's one of the world's choke points. No one's talking about the other places. Let's talk about the other places. Here's where the main global choke points are. When you look at this, you see obviously Panama Canal, Suez Canal, you'll see the Turkish Strait, you'll see all these other places, but I'm going to emphasize a couple of these here. Number one, Suez Canal. 12% of global trade goes through there, 30% of container traffic, $4.2 to $5.7 billion in transit fees for Egypt. So that means in this area, who has a lot of control? Egypt. This is why Egypt's also got its own power. They influence what happens in Suez Canal. So everybody's like, look, Egypt, just kind of be good. And Egypt's like, look, you guys are giving us a lot of money. It's good revenue. Let's just kind of, freedom, peace, and prosperity. Let's do that together, right? Egypt. So that's that part. So risk, Houthis, blockages. This has happened before. Houthis sees this and said, hey, we're going to get them all scared the crap out of everybody. We've seen that happen before. The other block, the other choke point is the Panama Canal, 13,404 transits, $5.7 billion in 2025. Risk, drought. When there is a drought, there's water that they need coming in from lake. Like there was an issue a couple of years ago with rain, El Nino. Didn't really happen. It was massively problematic. They couldn't get as many ships to be going out as they did before. The number, I think, got all the way down to 22 to 24. They'll generally do a number that's a higher number. I think the number is 36, give or take. So that was a problem. So this right here, Panama Canal, the fact that Panama Supreme Court came and took it back from China, C.K. Hutchinson said you don't have that much control over it, specifically the two areas. That's massive. Now, of course, CKs can come back and ask for money. China's probably not happy about that. This was one of the choke points I was very concerned about. If China could have a lot of control over, this is a good thing. Now watch the next one, Taiwan. Here's a concern with Taiwan. At any given time, this is a picture from May 26th of 2024. This is Taiwan. This is mainland China. Blue ships, that's Taiwan, that's US, Japan, US, Taiwan, all the blue. Everything you see with red is China. They all need to protect this place. China says this is ours. Now, if China decides to go scorched earth and say, you know what, here's what we're going to go after Taiwan and we're going to do all this stuff to hurt you guys with the ships. There's one area no one's talking about, the Strait of Malacca. And here's why this is important. 94,000 ships annually goes through here. You don't hear a lot of talks about Strait of Malacca. 25% of all goods, we're talking about $3.5 trillion of trade value that's moving through this place that we don't talk about a lot. But this is a massive risk for China. Why? That's 80% of oil imports. So let's take a look at this. When you look at this map, okay, this is China mainland. This is the Strait of Malacca. Okay, you may say, what's the big deal? For them to go through, they have to go through here. This is Indonesia. By the way, it's interesting because Indonesia, you see how big it is and how much of the size they have. It's, I think, like 650 to 700 kilometers. Even though it's that much, they're only making $3 billion a year off the Strait of Malacca. They don't charge any tax, nothing like that. Malaysia, right on this side, they have 650 kilometers that comes through right there. They make $7 billion a year. See Singapore, how small it is? That small little place, it's only 24 kilometers. They make the most money, $15 billion every year from the Strait of Malacca. Why? Services, people stop by, get their things scored away. There's so many different great experiences and services there. So they make that money for themselves. But the point here is the fact that if anything happens here, like the Strait of Hormuz, they put a stop to that, China's going to feel it. Now, of course, they have alternatives, but they don't want anybody to be messing with the Strait of Malacca. Now, last but not least, I told you at the end that Israel's sitting there saying, look, our concern is with the Strait of Hormuz, all the way on the other side, it's like 193 kilometers. When you look at this one here, Israel back in the 60s came up with an idea that they internally talked about, became public in the 1990s, I think 94. And they said, look, if we have to use Suez Canal, what if all of a sudden one day they say, Egypt says, hey, Israel, you better or else, guys, we got to think about ourselves long term. What if we do that? And they suggested the Ben Gurion Canal. And if you hear strait, it's God-made, it's natural canal, it's man-made. They said we should build a canal, calling it the Ben Gurion Canal, 250 to 300 kilometers. Some say a part of the Gaza war that took place is to open it up to build the canal there. And the ideas are pretty outlandish ideas. To build this, they need 300,000 men to help them out, $55 billion budget, I believe, to build this property out. And again, this was an idea that came about a long time that was discussed, proposed in the 60s, named first for their first prime minister. To be able to build this, they have to dig the place, bunch of nuclear bombs, blow the whole place up to open it up. And, alternative to Suez, West-friendly government, 2 ships at a time that they could pull off. And this is what they're proposing. Nothing's happened yet. People are saying this is something that we may want to entertain in case Egypt all of a sudden does something. Again, everyone's now thinking Chokepoint, right? And by the way, this whole thing that's going on, everyone's like, hey, man, we got to be careful. The Strait of Hormuz scaring the crap out of me. What if somebody else later on? We can't be controlled by anybody, right? Look, watch what Saudi all of a sudden came out and say, but by the way, all this time, we've been building something no one knows about. There's an alternative that we have. We don't have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. We have been working on the Saudi Arabia's East-West petroleum pipeline since the late 70s. And we put about 10 to $20 billion into this, and it's sweet. It just goes right through. And we have it available. And it's 5 to 7 million barrels a day instead of, maybe not 20 million, but still we're building this. So now, and suddenly out of nowhere, I think it was a few days ago, we're ready to be in business. We're available. This quickly? Yeah, we've been building it for all this year. Think about this, on how long they've been. So this is why it's important as you're going through this, and Trump all of a sudden used the DPA, the Defense Protection Act, to restart Santinez unit for oil in California, 50,000 barrels a day. It's not a lot, but it's still enough to kind of help out with some of the gas. Newsom's like, no, you can't come and deal with the state, climate, all this stuff. You can't, federal government can't come and deal with it. They're trying to lower your gas prices. For you, it's the highest. And he's trying to make a deal, $300 billion with India's Reliance Industries for new oil refinery in Texas, a first in 50 years. And all these other conversations are happening because everyone's realizing, hey, long-term thinking, guys, yes, time out. What are we doing to protect ourselves and hedge ourselves against a massive crisis that could happen, that somebody wakes up, the China, the U.S. and Iran and all the Russia and Israel and all these guys all of a sudden decide to do something. We have to be ready for it. It's all long-term thinking, and you better believe these conversations are being had right now as we speak. So if you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. The 51% of you click that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video, you want to watch another video we did on this exact topic. I did a video titled Regime Change or Regime Collapse. What are they trying to do with Iran? If you've not seen it, click here to watch the video.
We'll watch that one in just a second, but I did want to weigh in on what he's saying. It is true. This has shown a lot of countries how important some of these other choke points are. And there are some countries with strategic advantages that can now leverage that in terms of how they do business. And it's true. I mean, I think Trump saying his advisors didn't tell him that they could potentially attack some of the Gulf states was major to me, which means that some people, they just want a certain outcome to take place, that they don't want to say anything that may keep people from taking actions towards the outcome they want. So as a result, maybe they left that detail out. But it's important to talk about this because now China's got some things that they can do to add pressure to us. Some of the people who's hurt probably the most by this war is India. A lot of their energy is being, affected because they buy a lot of oil from Iran, and now they're, I think they just bought like 60 million barrels or something like that from Russia, which should last them a few months while this whole thing is sorting itself out. But also, China is also a major consumer of Iran's oil, and at some point, these people are going to say to themselves, "Hey, this is hurting us, and we need it to stop because there's only but so much rationing we can do in order to survive and provide for." Both of those countries have more than 1 billion people in there that are reliant on the energy that this oil brings, and there's only but so much they can do before they have no choice but to get involved in a real way. And that's what we don't want, for them to have to get involved in a real way. And they're already kind of puffing their chests and saying that they feel the ones who provoked this conflict is, the westernized sides, the Israels and the US. And, you don't want them to see you as a foe in that sense. You want them to see you as a friend. And, a positive thing is I think China recently came and asked Iran to negotiate. But this thing is very emotionally charged right now. I don't know if Iran's listening to anybody, other than themselves. I mean, there's been a lot of people who's been very influential in that country that was brutally murdered. And as a result, those people are probably not, rational in this moment because it's all happening day by day. Hopefully cooler heads can prevail and people can come to the table and make a rational deal that doesn't result in us, ending up in outright war, but we'll have to see how that plays out. All right, let's check out Patrick Bet-David. Since we are on the topic, let's check out Patrick Bet-David's additional video on World War III. Is World War III coming?
Getting hard and getting turned on are not the same thing.
That is why Blue Chew Gold was created.
The war in Iran is chaotic right now, whether you support it or not. Everyone's wondering how ugly could this turn into. If you look at the doomsday clock when they started in the late 40s by policy experts and scientists, it's at 85 seconds to midnight. It's never been this bad. So everyone's wondering, could this turn into a possible big nuclear war? And when has a regime change worked? When has a regime collapse worked? When we hear about regime changes, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Today, I'm going to talk to you about the 8 possible consequences of how this war could end, from worst case scenario to best case scenario. Okay, so before we get into it, I have one request for you. 51% of you that consume our content on Valuetainment are not subscribers. If you haven't yet subscribed, do us a favor, click on that subscribe button. It allows us to do more things, bring better interviews to you. Having said that, let's get right into it. Regime change versus regime collapse. What's the difference? So regime change is you depose existing government of another country and replace it with new leadership. So, for instance, back in the days, Mossadegh was the leader in Iran. He decided to nationalize all the oil. It affected all the oil to other countries around the world. BP was in there. They came in and said, no, we're not going to be doing this. Let's bring the Shah of Iran. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi shows up in 1953. That's regime change. Iran, for the most part, in the Middle East becomes peaceful for the next 26 years. But regime collapse is what happened with rapid breakdown of a government where leaders lose the ability to control the state, leads to power structures falling apart. In 1979 in Iran, that was a regime collapse. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, monarchy, he's running the country, boom, replace him with Khomeini, Islamic Revolutionary Guard. That's a complete collapse. So the first one is a change, the other one is a collapse. Now let's continue. Regime change. Iraq, 2003, regime change. Planning, strategic. Who drives it? Foreign governments, coups. Cause, deliberate removal. That's what they did. Hey, let's get this guy out of here. That's a regime change. Regime collapse. Soviet Union. What happened back in the day? Say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Or communism. It was so chaotic. Everybody was worried about communism being accepted by everybody. No. We cannot have this communism thing be a massive thing that people accept. We got to get rid of this. They did. Iran Revolution, we talked about. The planning, super chaotic. So if we're going through the collapse, super chaotic. Citizens, economy, military defection hasn't happened to Iran fully yet. The citizens, yes, but military turning against the government saying, listen, I can't support you anymore. And then obviously the internal breakdown. That's Iran, by the way, Venezuela. What just happened with Venezuela, Maduro, it's somewhat-ish a regime change, even though his VP is still there. It is an ish regime change. But let's continue. When you look at this, regime change methods. Number one is direct military action. Number two, covert operations, secretly funding, like not necessarily a proxy, but secretly funding, training, or inciting opposition in country. And in coercive diplomacy, sanctions, embargoes, rarely works, but we use that card every once in a while. Why does U.S. do regime change? One, containment, domino theory. Example, Cold War, enemy communism. Communism, if it would have spread, and that ideology that was spreading would have won, it would have been bad for everybody. It would have, well, we need to kind of go through the system. They have to put a stop to it. I believe that was a right move. Number two, protecting economic interests, ex-Panama, 1989. Number three, preemptive strikes, Bush doctrine, preventing terrorism, example, the Great War, you don't understand, they have weapons of mass destruction. We had weapons of mass destruction. That is something that a lot of military guys that went to fight over that lost their buddies, like, wait a minute, you will never get me on this ever again, which makes sense. And then number four, liberal interventionism, stop human rights violation. It's not fair what you're doing to people, and that's a whole different approach. Now, methods. Number one, coercive actions, using CIA for psychological warfare, which, by the way, it's happening right now in a big way. Funding opposition groups, orchestrating military coups, Iran 53, Chile 73 with Pinochet. That's that. Number two, conventional warfare, direct invasion, boots on the ground, Panama, Iraq. We're trying to avoid that with Iran, although we've had multiple leaders on Trump's administration that have said, we have to keep all the options out there. We may need to use it. We don't know yet, right? But he doesn't want to use it. You've heard that. Okay, number three, proxy warfare. Army training local insurgent groups to destabilize the government in Nicaragua in the 1980s. And some of the people right now are saying, well, wait a minute, the Kurds, what they're doing, isn't that kind of what you're doing? Are we giving them weapons? And they said, listen, we're not giving them weapons. Israel may, but we're not giving them weapons. So some of that. And then number four is economic coercion, right? Sanctions, trade embargoes intended to incite domestic unrest, which we have done to Iran for a long time. But this alone doesn't fully work all the time for regime change. So question becomes, has it ever worked? How often does it fail? Because you'll hear people saying, it never works, it always fails. Let's look at this. 5 examples of success, 5 examples of failure. And by the way, success doesn't mean 100% it worked. It means whether there was a success short term. We were able to get rid of this regime. So that's a success. Whether it lasts long term, 10, 20, 30 years, that's a different definition of success. It all depends on how we measure success. So, for example, examples of success. Number one, Operation Ajax. This was Mossadegh. He came in, all the major oil companies like, wait a minute, this guy wants to nationalize. He doesn't want to do business. We can't have a guy like this. Let's bring Reza Pahlavi. And he comes in, he stays for 26 years, and the rest is history. And during that time, when that was going on, of course, CIA was involved, MI6 was involved. A lot of people were involved. Guatemala, 19...
I have a question about that. Iran wanted to nationalize their oil fields. But isn't that what Saudi Arabia did? Saudi Arabia, when they first found that they had oil, did partnerships with a lot of U.S. companies, oil companies, to do to extract the oil, then I believe they initially were splitting the proceeds 50-50. And at some point they came in and nationalized it to the point where they're doing it themselves. I thought that's what Saudi Arabia did. So my question is, if that is indeed the case, and I could be wrong, but that's sort of the impression that I've had, is that they've done something similar. If that is indeed the case, then one would say, why would it be wrong for Iran at that time to nationalize their own oil fields? And this is where I think it's interesting, because a lot of westernized countries don't like people controlling their own resources. They want to be able to determine who gets the benefit from other people's resources. You can see a lot of that happening in Africa, where you have a lot of westernized powers essentially extracting the resources from the people, and it doesn't benefit the people, right? The majority of the resources is going and getting shipped out to these other countries, and the people, are living kind of crazy. Dirt roads, it just looks crazy over there. You know what I mean? But they're rich, full of resources, none of which is benefiting their country. Well, to Saudi Arabia's point, they have oil, and they were able to actually make, naturalize it to the point where their country controls the export and production of that oil. It didn't initially start that way, but it eventually got that way. And I think it was a similar thing when they wanted to do it, but for whatever reason, they saw that as a threat and decided to, I guess, regime change that group of people.
1954, Operation PB Success. Chile, 1973. Grenada, 1983. Operation Urgent Fury, not Epic Fury. And then 5, Panama, 1989. Operation Just Cause that they went through. These are successes at the time. Failures. Cuba, 61, Bay of Pigs. What happened? Cuba's still a communistic, which, by the way, if this goes through, you know what's going to happen with Cuba? Let's just say they succeed with Iran and they did with Venezuela. They're just going to go saying, hey, Cuba? Yeah. All right. Come on, guys. Let you kind of move out the way. You're going to be like Puerto Rico. And let's allow us to bring some hotels and kind of fix this place and tourism and all this stuff. Everyone's going to win. It's okay. Communism failed. No one's using it anymore. You no longer have Russia's backing. Soviet Union is not there to back you. They haven't been there for a while. What the hell are we doing? Let's move on. You start creating business, and that could happen anytime. Then we got Vietnam, 55 to 75. Another failure. Afghanistan, probably the biggest failure. And then you got Iraq. Some people will call Iraq the biggest failure, but Afghanistan's on that list as well. And then Libya, we know how that one ended as well. So now, and so by the way, when we're looking at the whole Iran regime change, regime collapse, there's one thing I want you to pay attention to. So 1953, Operation Ajax. You know who was president? A Republican president, Eisenhower. Interesting. All right. So they came in. They're like, no, we're not going communism. We're going to go pro-capitalism. And then you have the 1979 revolution with the great blowback. President Carter, Democrat, he said he was going to help. He did not. What happened? Regime collapse. Okay. Without, like, we almost kind of said, no, we're going to help you. No, we have your back. Don't worry about it. It's going to be great. Boom. We did nothing. IRGC came in, shit show since 1979 because of Carter. And in 2026, Operation Epic Fury, Republican Trump. So if you notice, one side is like, well, we'll kind of work with you. We'll kind of, we'll do this and we'll be, no, Khomeini was more like a Gandhi. He's going to come and make Iran. So you don't want somebody like a Pahlavi who is all about wealth and money and all this stuff. It's the language. That's the propaganda part that works. So now, while you're watching everybody today debate this topic, whether you know it or not, everyone falls in one of these handful of camps that's out there. Let me explain to you what this camp is. First camp is the Israel First Hawks. I don't care what happens. We have to have Israel's back no matter what. We got to protect. If they're doing this, we got to go to. That's the Israel Hawks. Number 2 is the Trump loyalists. Hey, I think this is the right guy. I voted for this guy. I support this guy. I think he's doing the right thing. I support his decision. And I'm excited about what's going to be happening. I'm a little bit uncertain. I'm a little worried, but I'm supporting him. Number 3 is the establishment media. The main Fox, CNN, MSNBC. They're kind of like, well, Khamenei's a bad guy. Well, he kind of had to go. But Mark Kelly, well, I don't know. I'm glad he was taken out. But, they're supportive, but they're still kind of like, what happened to the congressional that need to go through Congress? A little bit of that. Then you have the America First. I can't believe you're doing this. This is crazy. Israel owns U.S. It's a puppet. Bibi's running everything. I'm voting Democrat moving forward. And that's the America First. Some of the people there that are supporting that. And then you're going to have a radical left, the lunatics. You know how they are. They're complete. There's nothing he can do right. That's the radical left. And on the Iran side, you have one side that's supporting this. It's the majority. 80+% of Iranians are sick and tired of having a country being ran by a supreme leader. They're done with that judgment. Leave me alone. Let me live my life. It's a different world we're living in today with social media where you can no longer hide. And no matter how many times you're trying to cancel the internet so we can't see what's going on with the world, we're sick of the way you've brainwashed us and manipulated our parents for decades. It's done. Get out the way. Then the small percentage that says, I don't know if I want, I don't know if I want to get to this one. I don't know about, and that's the part. Those are the camps. You pick and choose which one you're in and what you decide to be part of. But
I've had so many people compliment me on my website and they're like, oh, did you do this? Oh no, I did not do this.
But those are the 6 camps that we have right now. Now let's cover this here. Okay. And this one here got very big. And it is what could happen. 8 different scenarios of what could happen in Iran from worst case to best case. What's the worst case? Samson option. Total nuclear destruction. First person, drops it. And then from there, you know what? Let me just take if you're going to kill me, I'm killing everybody with me when I'm going down, right? That's what I'm doing. Number 2, dark successor. So yes, we took out Khamenei. Yes, we took out 50+ leaders. Yes, we took out all these different sites. But the next guy that comes is even worse than the existing guy that they have. Maybe it's not a nuclear war, but they stay. But even a worse radical leader takes over Iran. Number 3 is the Syrification of Iran, okay? This is fractured state. They're kind of trying to figure it out. And what are we going to do? It kind of stays chaotic for a while, and everyone's kind of trying to figure out, and we're still kind of funding, trying to help out. But it can't stand alone on its own. Number 4 is the stalemate, status quo. U.S. goes to war for 4 to 5 weeks. We eventually run out of ammo. We run out of all these, interceptors, and we're like, you know what, guys? Let's just kind of finish it up. IRGC stays in power. Everything stays there, but stalemate. Nothing takes place. Number 5, a military leader takes over. So it's now ran by the military. Number 6 is the Persian Spring, citizen uprising, new government, kind of like what happened in 1979 with the revolution against the Shah. But the people come in, they're like, no, we're done with this. We got to do something about it. 7 is the Marshall Plan, similar to what we did with Europe. We decide to say, all right, the world, let's start investing into Iran. We're going to do this and we're going to fix this thing, economic recovery, heavy outside investments. And, just like we did with Europe. And by the way, Europe, they ended up spending around $130 billion in today's money to $150 billion. But also, you know how much money we spent in Africa with the Marshall Plan? We've had nearly 50+ or so Marshall Plans in Africa. You know how much money we've spent in Africa on Marshall Plans since 1960-ish? What do you think the number is? 200 billion? 300 billion? Why don't you fact check this? It's somewhere around $5 trillion. We've invested to try to fix Africa. That hasn't worked. So it'll work in Europe. It's a heavy investment. The world's going to want to be a part of it, and it could happen. But it definitely didn't happen in Africa when that was going on. So Marshall Plan could be the last one, 7th one. And last but not least is the great bargain. Iran becomes cultural paradise. You go there, Frank Sinatra music playing in the background. Everyone's happy, everyone's dancing, everyone's going to Cabaret Tehran, everyone's, by Caspian Sea. Oh my God, this is great. Businesses flood in. It's just going to be heaven on earth. Next, Christmas, you're going to say, honey, let's not go to Hawaii. Let's not go to Bahamas. Let's go to Tehran, Iran. It's going to be awesome. It's like the closest thing to heaven. You obviously realize the likelihood of this happening is pretty slim, okay? If it happens, I'll be the first one celebrating. You know what else is pretty slim? Here's the other thing that's pretty slim. This guy here. Both of these are slim. We're going to end up somewhere around here. I am hopeful. I am rooting for this thing to get done properly. I think the sequencing on the way they did it, it's fascinating to me. If this is actually what they did, it's brilliant. So you mean to tell me your number one enemy is China, and China signed a 25-year, $400 billion deal with Iran. Russia is not negotiating with you to help you get the peace done with Ukraine because you said, on day one, I will finish the war with Ukraine and Russia, and it hasn't happened yet. And you know, Russia got the plans on how to build the Shahed drones that Iran's building for only $20,000, and now they're building their own drones. So they're like, hey, we kind of need Iran to be good. And so you mean to tell me U.S. first goes and gets Venezuela first? So if China, 55% of the oil they rely on comes from Venezuela, and the other 85%, whatever that they get from the Strait of Hormuz comes from Iran. And you mean to tell me those two all of a sudden are under control of U.S.? So Venezuela's controlling here, and then you go and make the Supreme Court of Panama to get rid of C.K. Hutchinson, so China doesn't have any control in Panama Canal. If they retaliate, and then you go to Iran, and in the middle of this thing that's taking place, they're down missiles attacking by 86%, according to Wall Street Journal. You've taken out all these different places. Iran royally screwed up, attacked 10 other Gulf states, making enemies that are their neighbors, forcing your neighbors to become friends of Israel? What? Forcing these neighbors to all of a sudden say we're siding with Israel over Iran? Double dumb. But if this is actually what happened, this may go down in the history books as one of the greatest case studies. Negotiation by raising the temperature so high on China and Russia and saying, hey, you better not get involved. I'm just telling you right now. I'll do a deal with you because now you need oil from us, or you need oil from Venezuela, or you need oil from Iran. That's going through us. You better make a deal with us and don't get involved. Hey, Russia, you too, don't get involved. Maybe we broker a deal. Now, again, that...
I don't agree with this point. Why wouldn't China just get their oil from Russia? The two of them are more closer than China and the U.S. are. They're more closely aligned. Why wouldn't they just get their oil from Russia? Why would they agree to be blackballed or played with us as if we have credibility in their eyes? They're seeing that we're going ahead and essentially usurping our authority over sovereign nations, really to their detriment. And now they're going to play ball. I don't see that. I don't agree with that. Now, I think Patrick Bet-David thinks that this is a possibility. I just don't see it. I think they're more likely to be, rebellious, and they're more likely to go protect their interests than they are to play our game on our terms. I disagree with him on this particular point.
If they're doing that, you got to give them credit, which I know the media won't. But if that's what they're doing, that's why we voted this person in, President Donald Trump, and I'm rooting for him to succeed. But the reality of it is, this is a lot nastier than anybody can tell you behind closed doors.
What?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm naturally coming from a place of future looks bright. And I actually voted for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to be gone. It was one of the questions that I asked President Trump in the interview when he was here with me. And I said, what plans will you use? He says, I don't know. Everything is different. As a strategist, we're always going to be very fluid. So having said that, two things. If you want the notes from what we covered today, click on a link below or the QR code here. Go to Minex Circle. We're going to give you the notes for free. Number two, I made a video 7 years ago titled History of U.S.-Iran Conflict. If you've never seen this is 2019. I was bald back then.
That's Patrick Bet-David. Definitely go check out his channel. He's got some really good stuff, very informative videos. I like to reference him from time to time. I think he raised some decent points. I don't see the point where everyone's dancing in the streets celebrating us and Frank Sinatra's playing. I don't see that happening. I mean, best case scenario, I think that's how, the media would want to paint it, that this is what's going to happen. Not that how many Americans want to go hang out in Iran? Oh, wait. I don't know too many people that going to Iran is on their to-do list. I mean, I think if you took a survey, it's a very, very small number. It probably people who originate from that area wouldn't mind going back, but I don't know what I'm missing. I mean, I'm not pressed to go to Iran. So, and I'm not speaking for all the American people, but I'm just saying, I just don't think that people are so enamored with Iran that they want us to fight a brutal war for the sake of being able to travel to Iran and vacation. I just don't know that's a top priority for us here. But Patrick Bet-David, who I believe is of Iranian descent, would like that to be the case. I heard the French president make a point where he says you can't have diplomacy through bombs. I think that's probably the most reasonable thing I've ever heard that guy say. When you want your neighbors to like you, it's probably not best to go around bombing your other neighbors. So do with that as you may, but I think most likely militarily we will probably do a lot of damage to this country and probably will at some point subdue it. But I do think that it's a much bigger battle. Just like we subdued Afghanistan and we subdued Iraq, they will tap out at some point. But the point is, what happens next? You got to get the people to buy into your ideology. It didn't happen in Afghanistan. I mean, them people, for 20 plus years, we ruled them, and we ended up leaving there frantically, and they're now, the same people are back in power. So was it a success? I don't know if that was one of the ones he mentioned, but a lot of people with short memories, this is just in my lifetime. I haven't lived as long as some of these guys have, but in my lifetime, I haven't seen too many successful regime change operations. But for the people who wanna regime change, they're gonna tell you that it's existential threats and all these things, and that we have to do it to protect our homeland. And we can't get the ICE situation sorted, but we're trying to protect our homeland from Iran. It's crazy. I don't know. I don't see it. The connection, I would think, the drug situation here and all the stuff happening here would take precedence, but clearly it doesn't. So that being said, that was Patrick Bet-David's take. Again, show his channel some love and support him. He does do some good work over there. And if you're not connected to this channel, feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know your thoughts, and weigh in. Let me know what you think about the conflict and what the likely outcomes are. All right. So yours truly, Mr. B. We signing out. Thank you.